Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodha Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana Yashodha Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana Tiravana Chariyam Yamuna Tiravana Chariyam Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chariyam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Shtota Dashata. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Jani Taikul Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm here in Wellington at the Paramakaruna Ashram. It's one of the Vedic contemporary ashrams set up by His Holiness Devamrita Swami. So there's a few other devotees here in the room with me. But thank you all for coming. Hare Krishna. So, do I just share my screen, is it?
Yes, Prabhu, you can.
Okay. Sorry, you can see? Can you see that?
Yeah, yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
So, reading from Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, text 13, the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj, text 36 to 37. Text 36, I'll just read this and then we'll go together in text 37. So, Tasmad Purusha Utastau Hema Malambara Hiranmayena Patrena Siddham Adhaya Payasam. As soon as the oblation was offered in the fire, a person appeared from the fire altar wearing a golden garland and a white dress. He was carrying a golden pot filled with rice boiled in milk. Text 37. Savipranu Mato Raja. Gritvanjalin Anodhanam. Abhagraya Mudhayukta. Pradat Pratnya Udharadihi. Savipranu Maturaja Kritvanjalin Adodanam Avagraya Udhayukta Pradat Pratnya Udharadihi Savipranu Maturaja Kritvanjalin Nanodanam Avagraya Mudhayukta Prada Pratnya Udaridi. I'll just go straight into the word for word. Sa He Vipra of the Brahmanas. Anumata taking permission. Raja, the king. Gritva, taking. Anjalina, in his joined palms. Odanam, rice boiled in milk. Avarikraya, after smelling. Mudha, with great delight. Yukta, fixed. Pradat, offered. Patnyai, to his wife. Udharadi, liberal-minded. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The king was very liberal, and after taking permission from the priests, he took the preparation in his joined palms. After smelling it, he offered a portion to his wife. Purport. The word udhadadi is significant in this connection. The wife of the king, Sunita, was not fit to accept this benediction. Yet the king was so liberal that without hesitation, he offered to his wife the boiled rice and milk prasad received from the Yagna Purusha. Of course, everything is designed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as will be explained in later verses. This incident was not very favorable for the king. Since the king was very liberal, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in order to increase his detachment from this material world, willed that a cruel son be born of the queen, so that the king would have to leave home. As stated above, Lord Vishnu fulfills the desires of the karmis as they desire, but the Lord fulfills the desire of a devotee in a different way, so that the devotee may gradually come to him. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upriyantite. The Lord gives the devotee the opportunity to make progress further and further, so that he may come back home, back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurube Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I thought I'd start by creating some context what's going on in this chapter. The descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. So it starts off with the first son of Dhruva Maharaj, Utkala. His name was Utkala. He was a great Vaishnava from birth. And as we know in the Vedic culture, the first son is given the position of the throne to rule the kingdom. But because of his great attachment for the Lord and wanting to be 100% absorbed in the Lord, he didn't want to take on this Kshatriya position. Therefore, he manifested himself externally as a madman, as dumb, as lame, just like Jad Bharat, as we hear later in the 5th canto. Externally, he presented himself like some avaduta, so to speak. So therefore, he wasn't given the position of the king. So his younger brother was given the position. And then we hear in this chapter of the Bhagavatam, it goes through all the different generations descending down from Dhruva Maharaj and through his second son. And then we hear of Maharaj Anga, who was being mentioned. This is the king in this section of within these verses. Maharaj Anga, he wanted to perform the Ashwamedha Yajna. But as you've been hearing in this chapter of the Bhagavatam, the demigods did not appear on the scene. And in that section, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that in previous ages, Brahmanas were so potent, they were so powerful, that by their sacrifice, the demigods would appear. And Srila Prabhupada says that in this age of Kali Yuga, Brahmanas are not so powerful that they can call the demigods to descend to the earthly realm. But actually, we can see Srila Prabhupada himself is such a powerful Brahman, is such a powerful Vaishnava, that he himself, through his performance of Sankirtan Yajna, the greatest sacrifice, chanting of the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and his speaking of Krishna Katha, the demigods would come to hear Srila Prabhupada. We all know this situation, this pastime of Prabhupada in London, when they rented out this hall, Conway Hall, and the devotees went out to bring many people to Prabhupada's program. And unfortunately, not many came. So after the program, they approached Srila Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, we are very sorry that not many devotees came. And he said, that's okay. Didn't you see Lord Brahma and Narada Muni? They were there in the kirtan. And then Srila Prabhupada said, in the London temple, you must install 2 Vyasasans for Lord Brahma and Narada Muni. And they are still there to this day. And then we also hear Srila Prabhupada, the demigods, working hand in hand with Srila Prabhupada to execute the will of the Lord. We hear of the situation when Shyamasundar Prabhu, as we know, he was a dear friend, close friend of George Harrison. And Srila Prabhupada asked Shyamasundar Prabhu to approach George Harrison to gain funds for the publication of the Krishna book. And Shyamasundar Prabhu was very hesitant, knowing that so many people approach George Harrison, different charities and spiritual communities for funds for various reasons. So he was a bit ambivalent, hesitant. But Srila Prabhupada said, don't worry, Krishna will help you. So he approached George Harrison. He was in his mansion, sitting there at the table, and he asked the question, George Harrison, Srila Prabhupada wants you to give some Lakshmi, some money, some donation to help publish the Krishna book. And there was, Shyamasundar described, George Harrison's face became, oh, here we go again. Here's another religious organization asking for money. And at that moment, there was a thunderbolt that struck the house, and all the lights went out. There was a power cut. The lights were off for around 30 seconds. And then the lights came back on, and George Harrison had a huge smile on his face. And he said, of course, I will give money for the publication of the Krishna book. So we can see Srila Prabhupada himself is such a powerful Brahman and such a powerful Vaishnava that the demigods and the Lord himself are working hand in hand with him to spread the movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the potency of Srila Prabhupada's bhakti is attracting even more Brahma and Narada Muni. So the demigods didn't appear in Maharaj Anga's sacrifice. And he was perplexed. Why is this? All the Brahmanas are saying, we're very articulately pronouncing the Vedic mantras. All the paraphernalia for the yajna is pure, it's uncontaminated. We're doing everything perfectly, but still the demigods are not appearing. So Maharaj Anga approached the wisest sage in the council and asked, why is this? And the sage said, in this life, you have no fault. You've committed no offense. You've not performed any sinful action, not even in your mind. But in your previous life, you engaged in sinful activity, and therefore you have no son. Thus, the demigods are not descending. And he says, you must approach Lord Vishnu to obtain a son. And thus, the Ashwamedha Yajna can be a success. So this is the context that is happening, that is in this where we're up to in these few verses. They've performed a yajna to Lord Vishnu, and the personality is emanated from the fire with this substance, this boiled rice and milk. And we will hear how he offered the portion to his wife, he took a portion himself, and then the wife conceived. His wife, Sunita, obtained a son. But we will hear the son is King Vena. King Vena is very demoniac personality. It's described later on in this chapter we will read. Even at a young age, he mercilessly slaughtered his childhood associates, just like someone would slaughter an animal. Such a crooked mentality. It reminds me of these situations in America where there are these high school shootings. Right? Imagine if you had a son who took a weapon to school and started shooting everyone, started slaughtering everyone, doing a mini type of genocide. How disturbed you would be, but also how inconceivably disappointed and disgusted with your son. So this is this context of what Maharaj Anga is going through with his son King Vena. He becomes very disappointed, inconceivably so, disgusted with his son, that he wants to give up family life completely. So we hear later on in the verse, in the chapter, I'll stop sharing now. Sorry. So we'll see later on in text 43, as it's been described in this portion of in the purport here. The Lord gives the devotee the opportunity to make progress further and further so he may come back home, back to Godhead. In other words, the Lord fulfills the desires of his devotees, those who have a level of sincerity in such a way that they won't want those desires to be fulfilled. They'll become detached from that situation. The desire will be fulfilled in such a way that they won't want to have that thing happen again to them. So that's what we're seeing here in text. Where is it? Text 43. We can, from text 43 to 45, Maharaj Anga thought to himself, persons who have no son are certainly fortunate. They must have worshipped the Lord in their previous lives so that they could not have to suffer the unbearable unhappiness caused by a bad son. A sinful son causes a person's reputation to vanish. His irreligious activities at home cause irreligion and quarrel among everyone, and this creates only endless anxiety. One who, if he is considerate and intelligent, would desire such a worthless son. Such a son is nothing but a bond of illusion for the living entity, and he makes everyone's home miserable. So those who approach the Lord for material desires, those who are sincere, who approach the Lord for material things, they're actually, when seemingly negative, that the Lord orchestrates things in such a way that they never want those desires to happen again. And they're actually grateful for the situation. But first of all, we can see that the nature of material attachment, it is the beginning of all suffering. We can see, as Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj describes, that as soon as one endeavors for material happiness in this world, that is when the material suffering begins. They go hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other. Just like one of my friends from South Africa, he grew up in a farm area, and he was saying that, he told me once how there are these monkeys that would come to the farm and try to steal all the pumpkins. The monkeys like the pumpkins. So my friend's father came up with an idea. Somehow or other, he discovered also that the monkeys liked blue marbles. So he created this concrete, very heavy shaped pumpkin. And in the middle of the pumpkin, he made a hole and he put some blue marbles inside the pumpkin. So the monkeys would come along, they'll see the pumpkin and they'll see the blue marbles. They'll put their hand inside the concrete pumpkin and grasp onto these blue marbles. Because the fist becomes bigger when you clench the fist, they couldn't take their fist out of the hole. So the monkeys are sitting there with their hands in the pumpkin trying to get it out. they can't get their hand out because they want these blue marbles so much. And so then what the farmer did, my friend's father, he lets the dogs out where the monkeys are there, trying to get out these blue marbles, and then the dog just sits there looking at the monkey, and the monkey's so terrified, it actually starts screaming and making all kinds of disturbing noises, squealing, because it's so afraid of this dog. But all it needs to do is just let go of the marbles and it can escape. And my friend even said that actually some of these monkeys would actually just pass out because of fear. They're so attached to these marbles. All they have to do is let go. They want them so much, they're willing to undergo all this suffering, that they actually faint out of fear and anxiety. So that's the nature of material enjoyment. It is the source of our own suffering. We have these material desires for name, fame, adoration, wealth. So as soon as one endeavors for these things, that is when their anxiety begins. We can see so many famous people throughout history and time, like George Harrison was speaking about. George Harrison has so much wealth, has so much fame, but still not satisfied. So one is very fortunate in a way when one approaches the law for material desires, but the Lord fulfills them in such a way that they never want to experience that thing again. When we first hear this, when I first heard this, because I myself, there's material attachment, we think, oh, Krishna, don't take these things away. Please don't take them away. I don't want to suffer. But actually, it is out of love that Krishna is doing this. There's one prayer in the Baha'i tradition that I'd like to share that I think is very relevant in relation to this point. So the prayer goes like this: the more difficulties one sees in the world, the more perfect one becomes. The more you plow and dig the ground, the more fertile it becomes. The more you cut the branches of a tree, the higher and stronger it grows. The more you put the gold in the fire, the purer it becomes. The more you sharpen the steel by grinding, the better it cuts. Therefore, the more sorrows one sees, the more perfect one becomes. That is why, in all times, the prophets of God have had tribulations and difficulties to withstand. The more often the captain of a ship is in the tempest and difficult sailing, the greater his knowledge becomes. Therefore, I'm happy that you have had great tribulations and difficulties. For this, I'm very happy that you have had many sorrows. Strange it is that I love you, and still I'm happy that you have sorrows. So the Lord, Krishna, for the sincere devotee, he orchestrates the life of a sincere devotee in such a way that the devotee has certain experiences that they learn that actually, yes, this material attachment, this material nature cannot satisfy. And in order to withstand such tribulation, one has to be very sincere. On the path of Krishna consciousness, there will be difficulties, there will be struggles. We can see in the life of Srila Prabhupada that there are many, many trials and tribulations. We can see throughout Shastra so many difficulties. Prahlad Maharaj, and we can see the devotees in Russia trying to establish Krishna consciousness. They went through so many difficulties, but because they were so sincere, they understood that this is all for my purification, this is all for my betterment, this is all for me to become stronger so that I can become wiser and learn that actually, yes, this material nature cannot satisfy me. And that it is only Krishna, taking shelter of Krishna, that can really fulfill me. Just like in ancient Rome, when they would sell marble, sometimes if the marble was cracked, they would put wax inside of the cracks. Right? But when the wax dries and it's sealed over, it looks like normal marble. So the people would come and buy this marble thinking that it's genuine, good quality marble and use it for construction. But then when the heat of the sun melts the wax, they can see, oh, this is not actually proper marble. So for those, this is a way you can see for yourself how sincere you are, how sincere a person is in their Krishna consciousness. When difficulties and tribulations come about, do they melt under the pressure, so to speak? Do they give up their Krishna consciousness? Do they succumb to other mediums and means of shelter? We understand there's 4 different types of people that approach Krishna: those who are undergoing suffering, those who want wealth, those who are inquisitive, and those who are searching for the absolute truth. So when they approach Krishna, and is there suffering, they approach Krishna because they want to be relieved of suffering, but because the process of Krishna consciousness means that there will be trial and tribulation, they'll give up their Krishna consciousness. Sometimes the wealth will be taken away. They won't. They'll give up their Krishna consciousness. There may be other aspects of knowledge in the world that may seem interesting or, attracting or luring to people. They may go there because that's their reason for approaching Krishna. So we have to become like the genuine marble, so to speak, that doesn't melt, that is free of any crack under the pressure of the material energy. So ultimately, we want to approach Krishna with love. And I've been reading the Brihat Bhagavatam reader recently, and there's just on a point of a deeper understanding of why Krishna puts us through trial and tribulation, so that we can become detached from the material energy. It's not that Krishna just wants us to become detached. The deeper reasoning is that he wants us back. He wants us to come back to him. As we know, Krishna is interested in bhakti, and as is being mentioned in this this purport, this verse, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam dadari buddhi yogam tam yanamam upayanti. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me of love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So I was thinking, this verse is very much personified by Gopakumar in the Brihat Bhagavatam reader. Gopakumar is going throughout all the different planetary systems, even through the different Vaikuntha lokas in the spiritual realm, looking for Rajadananda. Krishna is the Lord of his heart. So the context in this situation that's happening in the Brihat Bhagavatam reader is that Gopakumar, he's just been in Dwarka speaking to Uddhava and Narada Muni. He's met Krishna in Dwarka, but still, because his heart, he wants that Raganuga Bhakti of Vrindavan. He wants to experience Krishna and Raj. They conclude that you should go to go to Vrindavan in the material world, because even Vrindavan in the material world is greater. Sanatana Goswami describes in this book, is even greater than Dwarka in the spiritual world. So under their instruction and guidance, Gopakumar goes to Vraj, and in the material world, and he's undergoing bhajan there. He's chanting, he's chanting, hearing and chanting in the groves there. And then it's described that Krishna reveals himself. And for a split moment, and Gopakumar tries to reach out to grab Krishna, but then Krishna disappears, and then Gopakumar goes unconscious, faints and falls unconscious. And then when he wakes up, it's described in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita that it's like a type of machine that travels, a type of vehicle that travels faster than the speed of mind is taking him through the material world. He's passing through all the different planetary systems. He passes through the material world, passes through all the different Vaikuntha lokas, past Ayodhya, past Dwarka, and this vehicle that he can't see, he's just being pulled along faster than the speed of mind through all of existence to the topmost region of the spiritual world, to Goloka Vrindavan. And there he arrives in Vrindavan, and he sees the town of Vrindavan. So I'll read from the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the section. The reason I'm reading this is because it's to show how much Krishna wants us to come back, how much Krishna loves us. The reason why he's putting us through difficulty while we go through the difficulties in relation to experiences in the material world is because ultimately Krishna wants us back. So Gopakumar here speaking. Looking around in all directions, I spotted in the distance a town adorned with the essence of all sweetness. On one side of that town, all about, I heard wonderful songs sung by cowherd women and the charming sound of the churning of butter and the jingling of bangles. Trying to subdue my agitated joy, I walked forward and came across a seated elderly gentleman sobbing profusely, incessantly chanting Krishna, Krishna. With some skillful effort, I made him speak, and I heard him say in a choked voice that this town belonged to Nanda, the king of the cowherds, Sri Krishna's father. As soon as I heard those words, I fainted, overcome with delight. After a moment, that compassionate old man revived me, and I ran ahead and approached a gateway of the town and sat there in the gate. And there I saw by the hundreds of thousands and tens of millions all sorts of wonders unseen, unheard of, unimaginable by anyone of this world. O best of the Brahmanas, I couldn't discern whether the people there were all enjoying the people there were all enjoying the highest bliss or suffering in the grip of terrible misery. I heard the gopis' songs coupled with their crying, but were they songs of the greatest contentment or the greatest sorrow? I couldn't tell. A person seeing that place might think he was in the material world, but by carefully reflecting on whatever he had seen before, he would understand he was now somewhere above all material planets, all higher non-planetary regions, and all the transcendental realms of the spiritual world. Then an elderly lady came by. I bowed down to her and asked in a plaintive voice where Sri Nandana was playing today. The elderly lady said, "This morning, the giver of life to us, Vrajavasis, went into the dense forest to play with his cows and friends and his respected elder brother. Later at dusk, he will return." All the Vrajavasis are waiting on this path along the Yamuna, their eyes transfixed on the road, These trees stand with leaves erect, eagerly awaiting the chance to see him. Surely he will come along this path. Sri Jiva Charan said, as if anointed by a downpour of the purest nectar, I gazed with one-pointed attention down the path the old lady had pointed out. The sheer force of my ecstasy had frozen my thighs, but with some effort I moved on, and I heard from afar a certain sound. Mixed with the mooing of cows, it was the supremely attractive murmur of Krishna's enchanting flute. That sound, sweet melodies of sporting played notes diverse with musical embellishments, was like nothing ever heard in the material world. Its attractive force at once overwhelmed everyone in the cowherd village. By the power of that sound, sap flowed in a downpour from the long rows of trees. A flood of tears fell from the eyes of every embodied being in the village of the cowherds. A shower of milk rained from the breasts of all of Krishna's mothers, even the elderly, and the rapid currents of the Yamuna suddenly stood still. I didn't know whether that flute gave out poison or the nectar of immortality, whether its sound was harsh like thunder or soft like water, hotter than blazing fire or cooler than the moon. I couldn't tell, but the sound drove all the Vrajavasis mad. All of them were utterly bewildered. Then I saw some women of Vraj come out of their homes, bearing in their hands the things needed to greet Krishna with worship. Others who passed by held ornaments and offerings of food on their heads. Other ladies, ignoring everything around them, ran toward the mingled sounds of the mooing of the cows and the song of the flute. In the frenzy of love for Krishna, the ladies stumbled down the path. Some ladies ran with their ornaments in disarray. Some could hardly keep their belts and hair tied. Some stayed in their homes, stunned like trees, and others fell unconscious to the ground. Some of the women who had fainted, their faces wet with tears and saliva, were carried forward by their girlfriends. Other ladies, pained by the urges of their love for Krishna, went ahead, pressed on by their friends. Come see him. The ladies, so diverse in complexion and adorned with diverse ornaments and dress, put to shame the good fortune of the goddess of fortune herself. Swiftly, the ladies ran to the bank of the Yamuna, absorbed in singing his names and pastimes. I too went forward, as if pulled by someone, joining the throng of gopis rushing forward on all sides. I too began to run quickly. Then from a distance, I saw him, his charming flute in his hand. Running quickly, he emerged from among his friends and animals and approached me, saying in a sweet voice, "Look, Sridham, here's my dear friend, Swarupa, the sun who shines on the lotus of your family." So this is Gopakamar's eternal name, Swarupa. Krishna was dressed for the forest. His garments, earrings, and peacock feather crowned all swayed to and fro, and so did his garland of kadamba flowers. His fragrance perfumed all directions, and his beautiful lotus face blossomed with a playful smile. His lotus eyes beamed with a merciful glance, and the varied assets of beauty decorated him in a singular way. The fingers of his lotus hand busily pushed back the locks of his hair, which flew about, adorned with the dust raised by the cows. His tender, divine lotus feet touched the surface of the earth just to grant her the gift of supreme splendor. Playfully dancing as they moved, they attracted everyone's heart with their great eagerness to walk quickly with large steps. The effulgence of his cloud-colored body, shining with the full sweetness of youth, lit up all corners of the sky. His beauty, which captured the hearts of the ever-dear devotees of Vraja, was an ocean abounding with countless excellences. He leaped forward and came close to me, compelled by the affection of his helpless devotee. I fainted in love at seeing him. He caught hold of me by the neck, and suddenly, he too fell to the ground. A moment later, I reawoke and carefully freed my neck from his grasp. I stood up and saw him on the ground in a faint, moistening the dust-covered path with his tears. Some gopis came and said, "Look, who has come here? What has he done? He has put our life and soul into such a state. Alas, alas, just see, people of Raja, now we are all dead. This must be some servant of the great wizard Kamsa." Lamenting like this in many ways, the gopis cried loudly in distress as they surrounded Krishna. Then from behind Krishna, several groups of cowherds quickly approached. Seeing him in such a state, they cried with pitiful voices. From far away in the village, Nanda and the other elder cowherds heard this terrible sound of crying. So too did Yashoda, ever affectionate to her son, and so did the other elder ladies and the maidservants. Together they all ran to that place, their feet stumbling on the path. Bewildered, they too cried, "Alas, alas!" Then the cows and bulls and calves came there, and the black deer and the other animals. Seeing Krishna in that state, they wept in agony. The animals, all crying out in love, their faces drenched with floods of tears, approached Krishna one by one and gently smelled and licked him again and again. Great numbers of birds flying overhead told also of their misery by making a tumultuous noise that sounded like people crying. And the immobile creatures in great pain within seemed suddenly to dry up. What more is there to say? All beings, moving and non-moving, were on the verge of death. For me, as I was drowning in a vast ocean of sorrow, confused about what to do, severely tormented, I put Krishna's feet on my head and began profusely sobbing and lamenting. Then Lord Balabhadra, Krishna's older brother, quickly arrived from some distance away, full of fear, white complexioned and arranged in blue garments. He appeared charming, for he was the same age as Krishna and as nicely dressed. Lord Balabhadra, the most skillful of persons, cried for a moment, but then seemed to regain his composure and looked all around. With great care and attention, he made me hold his younger brother by the neck with my arms. He wiped Krishna's beautiful limbs clean with my hand and made me loudly call out to him with many plaintive cries. Then he made me lift Krishna up from the ground. Suddenly Krishna opened his eyes, sealed till then by a flood of tears. Seeing me, joyfully embraced and kissed me. And then he looked around and became embarrassed. That best of lords took my hand in his own left lotus hand, and received me as a long-lost bosom friend. He asked me various questions. Then he greeted all the people of Raja and entered the best of cowherd villages with the gait of an elephant. So you can see how Krishna wants us back so much, even to the extent that when Krishna first sees his long-lost beloved devotee, he himself faints out of ecstasy in seeing his long-lost devotee. So I was thinking, yes, it can seem, hearing this point in the Bhagavatam about how Krishna fulfills our material desires, so to speak, in such a way that we don't ever want them to happen again because of the suffering that can ensue from them. It can seem discouraging, but actually it is all done out of love. It is all done with the intention of Krishna knowing our best interest, knowing that, yes, we do have to go through some difficulties so that we can become wiser, so that we can become purer, so that our love for Krishna can become untainted from all other types of desires. Ananya balashita shunyam jnana kamana anavatam anukulanam shilanam bhakti uttama. That pure devotional service is free from all desire for karma, material desire, from all desires of liberation, all desire for mystic power. That ultimately we should be, the summum realization is that ultimately everything should be done for Krishna's pleasure and for the pleasure of Krishna's pure representative. And as this is the proper attitude of the devotee, just as we can see here on text 46 of this verse, King Anga, he says, a bad son is better than a good son, because a good son creates an attachment for home, whereas a bad son does not. A bad son creates a hellish home for which an intelligent man naturally becomes very easily detached. So if the devotee has the proper attitude, they can pass through all seemingly negative situations. They can see them as blessings, as mediums, and as a catalyst for developing more love for Krishna. So I'll stop there. Sorry, I went a little bit over time, but does anybody have any quick questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Was such a beautiful class, explaining how the devotee goes through the tribulation in a different way Krishna wants to teach us the love for Krishna and the way to go back to Krishna's dham. So with the so much of good examples, is really is very, very enlightening, giving so much example, Prabhupada, and then your marbles. That's the very good example to me, because we see the marbles, as you said, that the marble was poured with the wax. So that shows it looks like it's a real marble, but ultimately it is not. It is just dispersed when it gets melted with the sun rays. So that is what actually happens in our life. We see it's a good thing, but ultimately it is a tribulation in our life. And then you explain about this Brihad Bhagavatam, Gop Kumar story, such a beautiful explanation. Thank you so much for enlightening all this with examples.
Hare Krishna. Glories to Prabhupada.
Thank you so much for your class today, Prabhu. So you really taught us how to take everything in a positive light, like whatever, if life throws us lemons, make it lemonade, so to speak. So yeah, how we can convert everything to increase our Krishna consciousness. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing your realizations. And you took us straight to Goloka with your reading of explanation of the Bhagavatamrita. Thank you for that. So again, just a thought came to mind when you mentioned that when Gopakumar went there and he saw all the devotees in so-called distress, like spiritual ecstatic distress in separation from Krishna. So I was just thinking that goes to show that like we as ordinary, like at least myself, I can say I as ordinary person, I cannot understand the behavior of the devotee, like because it looks like the material person is also in distress, and the material person thinks the spiritual person is also in so-called distress. So he thinks that, oh, we are both, there's no difference. He has taken the spiritual path, but still he is in the same distress. So, but probably a materialistic person doesn't understand the spiritual distress or the spiritual ecstasy what the devotee is going through. So just that thought came to mind. Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Yeah, that reminds me. There's one incident with Prabhupada. I think it was one reporter or some personality said to Srila Prabhupada, "It looks so like, he was a photographer," and he was saying to Prabhupada, "You look very unhappy and very disturbed in this photograph." And Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, that was one of my greatest moments of ecstasy." Something along those lines,
Oh, great.
Yeah, it seems like externally, for the devotee, it seems like externally they may be going, as you're saying, so much difficulty, like, yeah, Gopakumar here is saying in the Briyat Bhagavatamrita, he wasn't sure if they were torment, agony, or was they're in ecstatic bliss. But actually, as we know, for those who are on the very high levels of bhava and Krishna prema, their emotions and intense love for Krishna is so powerful that, yeah, these seemingly agonizing situations, they're actually the greatest ecstasy. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Hare
If,
Krishna.
if there are no further questions, then we can bring the class to a close. We hope to hear from you soon again, Prabhu.
Sure.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha,
पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो
अनंत कोटि वैष्णव
वैष्णव वृंद की जय।
जय जीवा चरण
जीवा चरण प्रभु की जय।
जय।
Srila Prabhupada ki
जय।